vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of misconceptions around it, and certainly for leaders. I think certainly, historically it's not been so cool as a leader to be vulnerable. Or like the caricature leaders always like, alpha, never showing a crack. So. And what are your thoughts on that? Has it changed, do you think?
I think it's still changing. I mean, I think it's getting better, but I think we still need to educate and raise awareness about how vulnerability can be a really powerful tool. Vulnerability can be a really powerful tool, but of course it has to be done in the right way. I give an example about a client of mine who was the director of a large IT division, and they had been preparing for a long, long time this huge international event, and COVID struck. And of course, this international in-person event had to be cancelled very quickly. And everybody was so despondent. Everybody was so unhappy. And the director got everybody together. First of all, he asked them how they were feeling, which was wonderful, to take the pulse and to check out how they were feeling. But then he shared with them the fact that he too was sad. And he shared with them the fact that for him, it was also frustrating. And that's a bit of vulnerability there. But then he went on to say, yes, this is a difficult moment, but let's not forget, we have another event to look forward to in a few months, which will be virtual. And we need to prepare for that and make sure that it's as good as possible. And so what he was doing there was actually selective vulnerability. So he was both showing how he was feeling, which helps the people to connect to him and respect, of course, there's a mutual respect that goes there. But at the same time, he was steering them on and he was showing that he still was in charge. And I think that's a skill, definitely.
It's a massive skill, because I think a lot of I'd say over the last few years, I speak to a lot of leaders and it's quite lonely there, right? Like you don't always, depending on what type of person you are, like sometimes people don't seek help when you're in a leadership role. You just feel like have this heavy weight of
responsibility. Yeah, it's a good point, Lewis. I think you're right. And I think that people don't realize that actually asking for help is a great strength. But they feel that they can't. And so, yes, in terms of their own personal well-being, the ability to ask for help or to say, you know what, I'm struggling with this, is often a really important thing to be able to do.
Yeah, it's also really, really empowering for the team, because if your team see you saying, hey, I'm struggling, or I'm afraid of this, or something's going on, and you're being vulnerable, you're being open to it. And then also, it kind of, they give permission, but just encourages people, if they're feeling something similar,
it does
to also share.
Yeah, it does. I mean, we often hear the words, I don't know if you hear the words a lot, psychological safety bandied around. That is the ability for a leader to create a safe space for the teams to share when they're not happy, or to give a suggestion, give an idea, or disagree. And if the leader is vulnerable in the right way, that lays the foundations for a psychologically safe team. So you're absolutely right. Yeah.
And just so we know, what's that? I'd love to talk about, what is the definition of psychological safety? Because it's talked a lot about, and just want to make sure we've nailed down
Do you know what? There are so many different definitions, and I often get asked this, and so I come at it from my angle, But I think it's generally accepted that it's the ability to offer an idea, disagree, voice an opinion, express one's feelings without fear of being judged or reprimanded for doing so. I think that is, for me, that's maybe the shorthand way, but that's,
I like that.
It is. Yeah.
What are you seeing, like, in terms of like creating an environment at work that's safe psychologically? Is there any like kind of best practices or tips, or how does that even evolve?
So it's really interesting. I mean, I think a lot of it goes back down to this emotional stuff. In the book, I refer to it as emotional safety. But I think basically you need to create this emotionally safe team. And so there are various things you can do. Obviously, we've talked about vulnerability. The leader can demonstrate vulnerability. That's one way. But another thing is to do things, for example, when you check in with your team, when you ask them, how are you? Perhaps it's a one-to-one, perhaps it's at the beginning of a team meeting, but just checking in and taking the emotional pulse is a great way to show that you care and that it's okay to talk about how you feel. So that's one way of doing it. And I always encourage leaders to say, are you checking in? Particularly remotely, people forget to do that nowadays. They think, they don't realize that it's an added responsibility when you're working remotely. So that's one way. Another way is to, you can actually create a kind of charter with your team. How is it that we would like to behave with one another? What's acceptable? How can we express ourselves? Create those sort of unwritten rules that we'd like to talk about perhaps more openly. So that's not one great way to create safety. And then there are other things which are, for example, not criticizing when somebody fails, but almost saying, well, that failing, okay, it didn't work out. Let's take it as a learning. What can we learn from it? Let's share our learnings on a regular basis. We can also share about things that don't go so well. I mean, some people talk about celebrating failure. Okay, maybe, but
learn.
Learn. Those are some of the things that you can do, I think.
Yeah. Because you want to be in an environment, for me, that people are, you feel that people are with you, not waiting for you to fail or waiting for you to pick yourself up, but just
exactly.
We're here together. Let's win, let's learn, let's fail, let's whatever together.
Absolutely. It is that we, isn't it? It's moving away. A leader needs to move away from the I to the we. So, for example, big ego, not going to be very conducive. So, yes, it's very much that we collaborative spirit. Yeah.
The moving from I to we is really interesting, because if you think because we're not, if you think about success early on, right? It's like, so let's say do well at school is I.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the sports. I mean, if you're doing team sports, there's an early we there for sure. But you do well at school, maybe you go to university, you do well at university is I, and maybe you get your first job, that's I. Then early on, it's individual contributor roles. Again, it's I, right? And then suddenly you make it to a role where actually it's about serving your team, and we, and helping them do great. And it's quite hard. It's like suddenly it's like, and especially if you don't do team sport, because I think team sport, you learn that early. If you're not doing team sport and stuff, it's a very weird thing to suddenly move to.
It is. You're absolutely right. I mean, some people might be lucky enough to be part of a big family, and perhaps when they're growing up, they are taught to help and support each other, perhaps. But as you say, I think it's not something that is, necessarily given to everybody. And that's why leadership training is fundamental. Leadership training and coaching is fundamental, because we're not all born into that. And
we're not.
Yeah.
Can I just give a little? I just want to give a little. This is a stat. I couldn't believe it, and it was like, I saw. McKinsey did a report recently. I went to see one of their partners do a talk. I've forgotten her name now. Anyway, the big stat was when people were polled about what the biggest stress in their job was, 75% of people said their boss was the biggest cause of stress.
Yes, I can totally relate to that, Lewis. Totally. It's a cliche, but it's true. You don't necessarily leave your job; you leave your boss. And I, for one, know that if I look back over my career, the times when I have left work, apart from one incident where I didn't feel there was room to grow, all the other incidents have been because of my boss. I don't know about you, but that's how it is for me. Yeah,
it's true. I mean, I speak with thousands of people about work, life, career, etc., from what I do. And money's never top of the list of why people want to move.
No,
it's always it's people, human connection. And I'm trying to poach people from companies, and happy people are way harder to move.
Yes.
And they're often happy because of these things.
You're right. You're totally right. I mean, I didn't leave my job because there wasn't a gym, or because there wasn't, a
free snacks
or mindfulness classes, So it is what it is. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if 75% of bosses know they're the biggest cause of stress for their team.
I don't know. Would they be interested? I don't know, Lewis.
I don't know, but like what we've just talked about. I mean, if you even need like a business case for like this kind of stuff, like your company's made up of people, and you can have the best business plan, and you could have raised money and whatever. But if you're not being able to keep your team and all of that stuff, then
it's very true. It's absolutely, you're absolutely right. It's fundamental. Yeah.
Yeah. How can you measure it? So the psychological safety. I mean, perhaps, we talked about
Yeah.
people leaving jobs, so maybe
Yeah.
candidate retention.
Yeah.
Is
Yes.
there any way of someone just thinking, actually, I could do with
Yes,
kind of
you
looking
can
at
measure
this?
it. You can measure it. I mean, one of the things that we do at HumanForce is we have a culture survey. So it's much like this. Well, we talk a lot about engagement surveys, but the culture survey is really looking for that safety. So you can measure it. You can do it in a survey. You can do it in focus groups, providing that you know what questions to ask, and providing that it's done in the right way. You can see how people are feeling. Do they feel that they can be themselves? Are they masking? Do they feel they belong? Are they able to disagree? Are they able to come up with solutions? Do they feel empowered? All these questions you can ask, but providing you ask in the right ways, you can get an accurate picture. Definitely. Yeah.
This is slightly cynical, but I'm going to say it anyway. But,
Go on.
people always talk about bringing your authentic self to work, but it always really feels like they mean, bring your authentic self to work as long as you believe what I believe. Otherwise, I don't want to hear like the certain topics
Yeah.
that politics, for example, obviously is a key one. But, there's certain emotive topics where I think people, if they found out that someone thinks the opposite or has the opposite view, find it very difficult to work together in a team. What do you think of?
I think that's true, and I think that there's a lot of work to be done in that area, because it kind of ties into the belonging aspect. Everybody's talking about belonging. We talked about diversity, inclusion. Now we're talking about belonging, which goes one step further than diversity and inclusion. It's about, not only are you included, but you actually feel that, you can bring your whole self to work and you are appreciated for who you are. So it ties into that. And I think that there needs to be more work done to have open and honest discussions and exchanges at work, particularly where you've got diverse teams, you've got diverse, really different sorts of perspectives. People need to listen to each other and approach it with emotional intelligence, incidentally. But I think we need to have open conversations and exchange. We need to be curious about each other and learn how to do that. Because I think sometimes it's just window dressing, the way that it's approached. You can have, I don't know, unconscious bias training, or you can have this or that. But actually, do people listen to each other? Are they curious? Do they respect each other's? I think it comes from there.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think good culture is, to an earlier point, isn't free snacks and the foosball table and stuff. It's caring about each person, because everyone's different. And stuff. The other thing to this actually is again, like it obviously talks about a lot, belonging and bringing your whole self to work and stuff. But then there's a lot of folks that, I was speaking to someone the other day and they're like, I don't want to bring my whole self to work. I want to just go to work and I want to do my work. And I don't want to share I don't want to share stuff with my colleagues. That's okay too, right? I mean, because
provided
this thing of
it's okay, provided you are not how can I say, providing it's not causing you harm, because at the end of the day you must, when we come back to the emotional side again, you must be able to be who you are. If you are masking, for example, if you are doing some kind of what I call emotional labor, that's very tiring and that can be detrimental to your health. So if it works for you and you don't have to cover up, or you don't have to pretend, or you don't have to ignore things, or you don't have to stifle your emotion, then that's fine. That we have a personal life and we have a work life, and we don't have to be exactly the same in both areas, but we have to be true to us, to how we feel. I think that's important.